In December of 1868, in a room at the St. Nicholas Hotel in New York, a 33-year-old man sat down and wrote a letter to himself. He was not writing a plan. He was writing a limit. The memorandum begins with an accounting. 33, and an income of $50,000 per annum. And then, in the very next breath, 4 words. Beyond this never earn. He wrote that the amassing of wealth was one of the worst species of idolatry, that no idol was more debasing than the worship of money, and that if he continued much longer overwhelmed by business cares, it must degrade him beyond hope of permanent recovery. Then he set a date. He would resign business at 35. He did not resign at 35. He worked for 33 more years. By the end of them he was, by most accounts, the richest man in the world. He gave nearly all of it away. He put his name on 2,509 libraries. This is not a story about a man who broke a promise to himself. Almost everyone does that. This is a story about what the broken promise cost. And the cost is not a metaphor. It was paid in a mill town on the Monongahela River in the summer of 1892, in a currency he never intended to spend. His name was Andrew Carnegie. Keep the number 33. It comes back. He was born on the 25th of November, 1835, in Dunfermline, Scotland, in the attic of a small one-story house on the corner of Moody Street. His father, William Carnegie, was a damask weaver, and for a while that was a respectable trade. Then the steam looms came. Carnegie described it decades later in a single flat sentence, and the flatness is the point. The change from hand loom to steam loom weaving was disastrous to our family. My father did not recognize the impending revolution. His looms sank greatly in value. Understand what a child watched here. He did not watch a lazy man fail. He watched a skilled man become obsolete. A man who was good at the thing, doing the thing well, while the thing itself stopped being worth anything. There is no lesson in it about effort. That is precisely why it marked him. The family sold the looms and the furniture. On the 17th of May, 1848, they sailed from Glasgow aboard an 800-ton ship called the Wiscasset, on 20 pounds advanced by a family friend. 7 weeks at sea, then the Erie Canal, then Allegheny City, Pennsylvania, across the river from Pittsburgh. He was 12 years old, and he went to work. His first job was in a cotton factory, where his father also worked. My first work was done there at $1.20 per week. He was a bobbin boy, 12 hours a day, in a room where the air was full of fiber. His second job paid $2, firing a boiler in a cellar. The boy whose family was destroyed by steam was now, at 13, alone in a basement, keeping steam alive. At about 14 he became a messenger in the telegraph office at 4th and Wood Streets in Pittsburgh, and there something happened that he called, for the rest of his life, the single most important event of his youth. It had nothing to do with money. A retired manufacturer named Colonel James Anderson owned 400 books, and opened them to working boys every Saturday afternoon. The rule as first written covered apprentices, boys bound to a trade. Messenger boys did not qualify. So the boy wrote a letter to the Pittsburgh Dispatch, argued the case, and signed it working boy. It was the first thing Andrew Carnegie ever published. Anderson read it, and widened the rule. Carnegie's words. Colonel James Anderson, I bless his name as I write. To him I owe a taste for literature which I would not exchange for all the millions that were ever amassed by men. He was capable of naming exactly what he owed, and to whom, and how much. Most people never can. That capacity is going to be tested later, on a much larger ledger. Before the steel, before the libraries, there was a $10 check that changed how he saw the world. In the telegraph office, Carnegie taught himself to read the Morse signals by ear, without writing them down. The clicks came in and the sentence came out of his mouth. It made him the fastest operator in Pittsburgh, and it put him in front of every important man in the city, because the important men came to the telegraph office. One of them was Thomas Scott of the Pennsylvania Railroad. The result was I was engaged February 1, 1853, at a salary of $35 a month as Mr. Scott's clerk and operator. He was 17. 3 years later, Scott asked him a question that reorganized his understanding of the world. Scott asked whether he had $500. He did not. The Carnegies did not have $500. But his mother, Margaret, took the deed to the house, went to her brother, and mortgaged it. Our house was mortgaged, he wrote, and Mother brought back the $500 which I handed over to Mr. Scott. $600 in the end, because there was unexpectedly an additional $100 to pay as a premium. $600 on a mortgaged house for 10 shares of the Adams Express Company. Then the first dividend arrived. $10, a check drawn on the Gold Exchange Bank of New York. And a young man who had been paid by the week since he was 12 looked at a piece of paper that had arrived without him doing anything at all. It gave me the first penny of revenue from capital. Something that I had not worked for with the sweat of my brow. Eureka, I cried. Here's the goose that lays the golden eggs. Until that check, he had understood the world as containing one kind of income, the kind you earn with your hands and your hours. After it, he understood there were two, and that only one of them scales, because a man has a fixed number of hours and capital does not sleep. By December of 1859 he was superintendent of the Pittsburgh division of the Pennsylvania Railroad, at 24. From that seat he could see, before almost anyone else, what the railroads were about to need. Sleeping cars. Iron bridges to replace the wooden ones that kept burning. Rails. And then, after Bessemer, steel. So he took positions in all of it. And here is why he beat men who were richer and better connected. Andrew Carnegie did not invent anything. He was not a metallurgist. What he brought from the railroad was cost accounting, the habit of knowing, to the penny, what each unit cost. His competitors in iron and steel often did not know their own cost per ton. They knew what they charged. Carnegie knew what it cost him. So in a boom he could cut price and still make money, and in a panic, when everyone else stopped building, he built, because construction was cheapest exactly when it looked most insane. He put it as a rule. Watch costs, and the profits take care of themselves. By the 1880s he was the dominant steel producer in the United States. He was also something rarer. A rich man that working people, in the main, liked. That was not an accident. What he did next was not hypocrisy in private. He published it, under his own name, at the height of his power. Go back to the hotel room, because the note he wrote there was never meant for us. That memorandum from December 1868 surfaced only after his death, printed as an editor's footnote in his autobiography in 1920, introduced with the line, "It has only recently come to light." Which means that when a 33-year-old Andrew Carnegie wrote, "Beyond this never earn, make no effort to increase fortune, but spend the surplus each year for benevolent purposes," he was not performing. He was alone. Nobody was going to read it. And then he went back to work for 33 years. Now, that alone is a familiar human failure and not much of a story. What makes Carnegie different is what he did in public in the meantime. He did not quietly abandon the creed. He published it. Repeatedly, in the most respectable magazines in the country, under his own name. In April of 1886, in the Forum, in an article titled An Employer's View of the Labor Question, the largest steel employer in America wrote this: "The right of the working men to combine and to form trades unions is no less sacred than the right of the manufacturer to enter into associations with his fellows, and it must sooner or later be conceded. And this. My experience has been that trades unions, upon the whole, are beneficial both to labor and to capital. For months later, in August of 1886, in the same magazine, in an article called Results of the Labor Struggle, he wrote the line that would follow him into every obituary. There is an unwritten law among the best workmen. Thou shalt not take thy neighbor's job. He went further in the same passage. Better for an employer to let his work stand idle and wait out a dispute than to hire the sort of men who will take another man's place. He was 33 when he wrote his private limit. He was 50 when he wrote that in public. And in 1889, in the North American Review, he published the essay simply titled Wealth. The world would later rename it The Gospel of Wealth. In it he argued that a rich man is a trustee for the poor, and he ended with the verdict he expected history to pass on men like himself. The man who dies thus rich dies disgraced. So by 1892, Andrew Carnegie had constructed, brick by brick and in his own handwriting, one of the most admirable public identities in America. A weaver's son who remembered. An employer who defended unions. A millionaire who called money an idol. Then a contract expired. The Homestead Steel Works sat on the Monongahela, about 7 miles upriver from Pittsburgh. It was the crown of the operation. And on the 30th of June, 1892, its labor agreement with the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers ran out. Of roughly 3,800 workers at Homestead, something on the order of 750 to 800 were members. A minority, and the most valuable minority. Steel prices were good, so the union asked for an increase. Henry Clay Frick, chairman of Carnegie Steel and the company's chief executive, came back with a cut. Lower the minimum on the sliding scale from $25 a ton of billets to $22. Reduce tonnage rates. And move a set of positions out of the bargaining unit altogether. And here is the document that decides how this story has to be told. On the 4th of April, 1892, 3 months before anything happened, from his own desk, Andrew Carnegie drafted a notice to be posted at Homestead. It read, "The firm has decided that the minority must give way to the majority. These works, therefore, will be necessarily non-union after the expiration of the present agreement." Frick did not post it. Read that again, slowly. The manager judged the owner's notice too aggressive to put on the wall. On the 4th of May, Carnegie wrote to Frick, "We all approve of anything you do, not stopping short of approval of a contest. We are with you to the end." On the 10th of June, by cable. "Of course, you will be asked to confer, and I know you will decline all conferences." Then Andrew Carnegie went to Scotland. To Rannoch Lodge, on Loch Rannoch, in the Highlands. At Homestead, the fence went up. Board walls running down to the low water mark of the river, barbed wire along the top, towers with searchlights, high-pressure water cannon at the gates. Around 3 miles long and something like 12 feet high, with openings cut at shoulder height. The men had a name for it before it was finished. They called it Fort Frick. On the 2nd of June, a full month before the contract even expired, Frick had written to the Pinkerton National Detective Agency and asked for 300 men. And on the evening of the 28th of June, before the agreement ran out and before any strike vote was taken, Frick locked out the plate mill and an open hearth. The next day he locked out the rest. History calls what followed the Homestead Strike. It began as a lockout. Everything you have heard so far is the case for the defense. Now the summer of 1892. On the night of the 5th of July, 1892, 2 barges left Davis Island Dam and started up the Monongahela behind a steam tug called the Little Bill. On board were 300 Pinkerton agents, and crates of rifles. They were not expected to fight. They were expected to arrive before dawn, walk into an empty mill, and hold it. But the men of Homestead had watched the river for days. A scout downstream saw the barges and telegraphed ahead. By the time the tug reached the plant landing, at somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning, the bank was lined with thousands of people. Workers, wives, children, and men had torn down a section of the fence to get to the water. Nobody knows who fired first. That is not modesty. It was contested at the time, contested by the congressional investigators, and the Battle of Homestead Foundation says plainly today that we never will know. What is known is that it lasted 12 hours. There was a second landing attempt around 8 in the morning. The crowd poured oil on the river and set it alight. They rolled a burning rail car down the incline toward the barges. They fired a cannon. Around 5 in the afternoon the Pinkertons ran up a white flag, surrendered, and were made to walk a gauntlet through the town, and they were beaten as they walked. The dead: 7 workers and 3 Pinkertons. Those are the figures on the Pennsylvania State Historical Marker, and 3 is also the number William Pinkerton himself gave under oath to a congressional committee later that year. Counting those who died afterward of their wounds, the Library of Congress puts the total at 16. The families of the 7 are in the cemeteries above the town. On the 10th of July, Governor Robert Pattison, who had pointedly refused to move on the 6th, ordered out the state militia. About 8,000 troops arrived on the 12th under Major General George Snowden, who announced on arrival, "I want you to distinctly understand that I am the master of this situation." Under their protection, the mill reopened with replacement workers. On the 23rd of July, a New York anarchist named Alexander Berkman, who had no connection to the Union or to the steel industry at all, walked into Frick's Pittsburgh office, shot him twice and stabbed him with a sharpened file. Frick survived, and finished his workday at his desk. The Union had nothing whatever to do with it, publicly disavowed it, and was destroyed by it anyway. The lockout held through the autumn. On the 20th of November, 192 men out of more than 3,800 showed up to vote. They voted 101 to 91 to go back. Homestead would not have a union again for 45 years. Now the cables. On the 7th of July, the day after the battle, Andrew Carnegie sent this to Frick from Scotland. Cable received. All anxiety gone since you stand firm. Never employ one of these rioters. Let grass grow over works. Must not fail now. You will win easily next trial. 10 days later he wrote privately to a cousin. Matters at home bad. Such a fiasco trying to send guards by boat. Still we must keep quiet and do all we can to support Frick and those at seat of war. I have been besieged by interviewing cables from New York but have not said a word. Silence is best. Read the objection carefully. It is not that men were brought upriver with rifles. It is that the landing was botched. The complaint is tactical. In August, from Rannoch, he told Frick he had written to Whitelaw Reid, the Republican candidate for vice president, who was pleading for a settlement because Homestead was sinking the national ticket, to say that the replacement workers would not be dismissed. In late November, from Italy, he cabled Frick. Life is worth living again. Cables received. First happy morning since July. Surprising how pretty Italia. Congratulate all around. And decades later, writing the autobiography that the world would read, Andrew Carnegie wrote this sentence about the summer of 1892. I was traveling in the highlands of Scotland when the trouble arose, and did not hear of it until 2 days after. His own cable of the 7th of July opens with the words, "Cable received." Here is the honest boundary, and this channel will not cross it. What is documented is approval, foreknowledge, and continuous direction. In April, in May, in June, on the 7th of July, in August, in November. What is not documented, and what remains interpretation, is whether he crossed the Atlantic in order to be absent. He did not need to give the order. He had already given it in April, and the men on the ground had decided it was too much to put on a wall. If someone came to mind while you listened to that, someone who stated principles you have never actually seen tested, send this to them. He outlived it by 27 years, and spent almost every one of them giving the money away. In 1901, Andrew Carnegie sold. The buyer was a syndicate led by J.P. Morgan, assembling what became the United States Steel Corporation. The price for the Carnegie properties is usually given as roughly $480 million. Carnegie's personal share was about $225 million, paid in 5% gold bonds. There is a famous scene in which Morgan shakes his hand and congratulates him on being the richest man in the world. You will hear it in most tellings. It is not in Carnegie's autobiography, and it first appears in a biography published 13 years after his death. It may have happened. It is not a record. What is a record is what he did next, and it is not a small thing. He gave away roughly $350 million. By the National Park Service's accounting, almost 90% of his fortune. He funded 2,509 library buildings around the world, about 1,680 of them in the United States. He founded the Carnegie Corporation of New York in 1911 and endowed it with $125 million, the largest single philanthropic trust that had ever been created. Colonel James Anderson opened 400 books to working boys on Saturday afternoons. Andrew Carnegie repaid him 2,509 times. He knew what the world would ask him about. In Chapter 17 of the autobiography, the chapter titled simply, The Homestead Strike, he wrote the line that gets quoted at the end of every documentary about him. Nothing I have ever had to meet in all my life, before or since, wounded me so deeply. That is where the quotation almost always stops. Here is the next sentence. It was so unnecessary. The men were outrageously wrong. He was still, at the end of his life, the injured party. The wound in that passage is his. Andrew Carnegie died on the 11th of August, 1919, at Shadow Brook in Lenox, Massachusetts, at the age of 83. He had asked for an epitaph. Here lies a man who knew how to enlist in his service better men than himself. He did not get it. In 1937, 45 years after the barges, the steelworkers of Homestead were recognized again. Which leaves the only question that matters, and it is not a question about Carnegie. Every letter, every cable, and every article quoted in this video is in the public domain, and every source is listed in the description below. So take the principle, and then look at the price tag, because this channel does not hand you one without the other. The principle is this. A conviction you do not enforce when enforcing it would cost you money is not a conviction. It is a preference. And the test never announces itself. It does not arrive labeled. It arrives as a contract expiring on a Thursday in June, 3,000 miles away, on somebody else's desk, at a moment when you are genuinely, verifiably somewhere else. Andrew Carnegie's name is on 2,509 libraries. His name is also on a cable that reads, "Never employ one of these rioters." Both of those signatures are his. He did not get to choose which one counted. Neither will you. And notice what he was actually capable of, because this is the part that should make you uncomfortable. He could do precise moral bookkeeping. He proved it at 33, alone in a hotel room, with nobody watching, writing down his own limit in his own hand. The failure was not that he could not see clearly. The failure was that he could only see clearly about a ledger that had already closed. At 33, Andrew Carnegie wrote down his limit. He spent 33 years passing it. Write yours down today. Then write down what you would give up to keep it. The second number is the real one.